So the next part of the project is the exterior walls. That is usually the easiest way to begin. So you want to make sure that you go under the Architecture tab, and if you go to Wall Architectural, you're going to see over here that you scroll up, you have some exterior walls. You first have exterior brick on CMU. I highly suggest that you don't use this one. Concrete masonry units are a good way to construct a wall, but at this time in our society, it's actually more expensive to do that. It's also much harder to cut openings, things like that. So unless you can justify to me using that wall construction type, I suggest that you don't. The next one is brick on metal stud. This is probably the wall that most of you want to start with, unless you plan on doing some type of metal paneling or something like that on the exterior. In either case, as long as you pick an exterior wall to start with, we can adjust what the exterior finish is at a later time. So let's look at the construction of this wall. If we go into it and hit structure, you can see that we have brick on the outside, that's 3 5/8. We have an air barrier of 3 inches. We have our membrane layer, the air infiltration, which does not show any thickness because it's a very, very thin sheet of material. Then we have our sheathing, our exterior sheathing. This one in this case is plywood. It could be some type of a gypsum board, just as long as it's an exterior rated material. And then you'll see the actual structural component of the wall, which is the 6-inch metal stud, which is what we want. You'll notice it has a core boundary on each side. This is just part of the way that the wall is set up. The core boundary is typically on each side of the structural component of the wall. And then to the interior, we have a vapor retarder, which basically is a sheet of plastic. Again, it's very, very thin, so it does not show any thickness here. And then on the gypsum wall board, in this case it has 1/2 inch. In most cases, we typically in commercial construction always use 5/8 inch. So I'm going to go ahead and change that so that it is the correct wall type. And you'll notice when I did that, it actually changed the total thickness of the wall. And I'm going to say okay. And then I want to duplicate this or go back to that original wall type. So I'm going to do this by adding 5/8 inch gypsum board on there so that I know that that is the wall that I changed. And I'm going to say okay. You can see the name has changed. And I'm going to say okay. I do want to caution you not to use a generic wall. In my courses, I don't allow you to use generic walls. Even though you may think generic wall is okay to start with, please don't use one. Once you decide on your exterior wall, I can help you create it. If it's something different, we can always go back and change it. The next part before we begin to draw is you do need to set up a structural grid system. You are going to use a W12 by 53. I have set up some requirements as far as the spacing, and this is a little bit flexible. I have set up a maximum column spacing of 30 feet and a minimum column spacing of 15 feet. What I want to see is equal spacings throughout most of it. What we try to do is keep all of our structural members the same sizes. It makes it much simpler to construct. It makes it more economical to be able to do that. So once you start laying out the building, you want to make sure that you set that up correctly. As you are laying out your grid system, you need to make sure that it has good dimensions. And what I mean by good dimensions is it's nice if it can be rounded to like feet, like 20 feet, 21 feet, 22 feet. But especially if you can't do that, make sure it's at least a full inch. Don't do 21 feet, 1.5 inches. You want to be very consistent and you want to have good numbers. So we know the building itself from our original project has some certain dimensions. I've shown an example here in the assignment of one way to lay it out. You'll notice that my column spacing is 20 feet, 20 feet, 20 feet, and then I actually have 30 feet for my core. then I have 20 feet, 20 feet, 20 feet. And then I have 20 feet here, and then I have 10 foot for my vestibule. I would also need some sort of a vestibule here at the back of the building. It could be inside, it could be outside. So it might be simplest if you kind of know the basic dimensions of your building to lay out your grid system first. So how we would go about doing that is if I go to my structure tab and I go to column, and you'll see that over here I have some columns in here, okay, but I may not have the one that I want. So in this case I've asked you to use a 12 by 53. So I'm going to go to load family, and I'm going to scroll down to structural columns, and I'm going to go with steel, and I'm going to do the wide flange column at the bottom, and I'm going to say open. And then you see it's going to give me all of my choices. They are in numerical order with the first part of it, and I wanted a 12 by 53. So if I come down here and pick on that and say OK, now I have my column. I'm just going to place one to begin with. Now you'll notice it does not show up. If I go to my 3D view, there is my column. I'm going to click on that column, and I'm going to set the base level, and I apologize, my little notes are off on my other screen. I am going to set my base level to level 1, and I'm going to set the top level to roof, and I'm going to hit apply. Now if I go back to my level 1 plan, I can now see my column. What I'm going to do at this point is I'm going to go ahead and start with my grid. I'm going to go to my grids, and I'm going to align this with that first column, and I'm going to bring that up. And then I'm going to do another grid from the bottom and come over 20 feet and go up. Do another grid 20 feet and go up, and do one more grid at 20 feet and go up. Then I'm going to do one at 30 feet because this is going to be my lobby and core area. So I can adjust this by just clicking on that grid and changing this to 30 feet. And then I'm going to continue by adding my other grids at 20 feet. And then adding the other grid at 20 feet. And then adding another grid at 20 feet. So now it will make it much easier for me to lay out my columns. So I need to go in the other direction. So again, I'm going to add my grid, and I'm going to come off of that column, and I'm going to go this direction. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change this to an A, because I want to go A, B, C, D, that direction. So I'm going to go ahead and continue to add these at 20 feet. And again, I can get my alignment lines. I suggest that you do not copy grid lines. Revit doesn't like that. It doesn't like to work very well that way. And then I'm going to do one at 10 feet for my vestibule. Actually, I'm going to do 12 feet because that's what it's liking better. Now, I kind of have an idea of where the perimeter of my building is. So I want to grab these grid lines and I want to pull them down below my elevation marker. If I don't do that, when I go to my elevation, I'm not going to see those grid lines, and I want that to happen. This one again is pretty far out here. So if I just grab this little circle and pull it up, I can pull it up like that. And then this one, I'm going to move over closer. This one, hold down the control key, move these over more in the middle, and that way I have all of my grids covered. So now what I can do is I can place the rest of my columns very easily. Right here, I have something that says at grids. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and remove that column that I put in. And I'm going to do my column and I'm going to do at grids. And again, I've already got my 12 by 53 selected. So if I just window on all of my grids and then click on the check mark, you'll see it placed all of my columns. I get a warning down here because it says it can't see them. And again, I need to go back to here, to my 3D view. And I'm going to zoom out and I'm going to select all of my columns. And I'm going to set the top level to roof. Again, I apologize, my little box is off on my other screen. And I'm going to set the base level to level 1. So now when I go back to my level 1 plan, I should be able to see all of my columns. Now again, it's important, I feel, that down here at the bottom that you set your setting to fine so that you can see the actual thicknesses of everything. It makes it much, much easier to work with. Now that I have my grids in place and my columns in place, I can start putting in my exterior walls. One thing that I want to do is, if you read through the assignment here, I've asked you to create a new level called parapet, because we want our exterior walls to go to the parapet. If you're not familiar with what a parapet is, you need to look that up. Okay, a parapet is basically a fake wall that comes up above the roof. It helps to hide stuff that's on the roof. It also keeps people from falling off of the roof. If you don't have that, in most cases you have to have some sort of fencing. So a parapet is something that you will have on your building, because more than likely you will have a flat roof. I want your parapet to be at least 4 feet above your roof line. So we're going to go into our elevation. And I just picked the north one, and right now you see you have a footing and a bottom of footing. We are not going to do footings on this project. So if you want to select those and hit delete, those will be deleted. You'll notice they also deleted out of your floor plans. I want you to change your roof height to be 42 feet. Then we need to add another level, and we can do that under the Architecture tab. And we're going to go up about 4 feet. I'm not going to worry about that. I'm just going to get it on there, and then I can come back in and change it. And I'm going to call this parapet. And I want it to be at 46 feet. Now, a couple of things I need to do. You can see my level lines are outside of my grid lines. So if I take these and I just move them over, okay, and then I want to take my grid line and move them up past my building so that I have something that looks like that. And I will need to do that on each of my elevations. So again, I just click on this grid line and grab the bubble and pull it up. And in this case, I'm far enough outside my building over here. I don't need to make any adjustments. Go to my south. This one is fine, the way that it is set up. And then go to my west. These are fine the way they are set up. So now I'm ready to go back to my level 1 plan. And I'm ready to start putting in my perimeter walls. Again, I want to go to my wall, Architecture, and I'm going to do the one that I created, and I want the base constraint to be at level 1, and I want the top constraint to be at the parapet. Okay, this way my perimeter wall goes all the way up. So for right now, I'm just going to kind of sketch my wall in. And again, I want to go to the right. If I go to the left, it will put my brick on the inside. If I go to the right, it will put my brick on the outside. So for right now, I'm just going to kind of draw the box in for my building. So if I zoom in, I can see all of the different components of my wall. This is my gypsum board, the 5/8" gypsum board. This area here is my 6" metal stud. This is my exterior sheathing. This is my 3" airspace, and this is my brick. So how I want this to work with my columns and such is, if you look on the assignment, I want my column to fit against the stud. I'm not going to make you change the exterior wall at this point and take out this piece of gypsum board in here, because it would not in reality be there, but we're just going to butt our wall up to the columns themselves. So I can use my align tool. If I go to modify and I hit align, I pick what I want to align to first. So I'm going to pick this side of my column. And then when I come up here and get close to the line I want, if I hit the tab key, it will take that wall and move it. I'm going to do the same thing here. I want to pick the very end of this column, and then I'm going to come over here and hit my tab key and move that wall in. Then I'm going to do the same thing down here. I'm going to do a line, pick that side of the column, and hit my tab key to get this side of the wall and align it that way. Then I'm going to come over here and do the same thing. And then this one should be aligned at the top. So I have that fixed very, very nicely. Now, this area that's out in front for my vestibule, that is going to be my curtain wall area. You will be required to have a curtain wall in your building. So if you go to architecture and you go to wall, architectural, and if you scroll down, you will see you have curtain wall. So I'm going to, for now, and again, I can adjust this later, but for right now, I'm going to go ahead, and again, I want it to go up to my parapet. I'm going to place, so I did make an error. I need to move this exterior wall up. So I'm going to do that now. I'm going to use my align tool and go to put that wall there. And since I do not need these columns out here, I'm going to delete them. And then I'm now going to place my curtain wall. And for now, I'm just going to kind of place it something like this. But again, once I get my mullions placed, I can adjust this. So I'm not going to worry about this too much. I am going to break this wall in between here because this is going to be my area that I can look down into from my other floors and such. So I'm going to use my modify tool, and I'm going to use split, and I'm going to break this wall, and then I'm going to delete this section out. And again, I'll make adjustments here on how I want this to work once I get to that point. That concludes the exterior walls and the grid system. Next, we will talk about the interior walls.